It was a cold, rainy morning in the small town of Willow Creek. The streets were almost empty, and the gray clouds hung low, casting a gloomy shadow over the quiet neighborhood. Inside the town's little diner called Sunny Bites Cafe, the smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled the air. Emma, a young waitress in her mid-20s, was busy cleaning tables, smiling politely at the few early customers who had come in to escape the weather. She was used to mornings like this, slow, quiet, and lonely, but she never complained. She needed this job more than anything because it helped her take care of her sick mother at home. The diner was her second home. Every morning, Emma arrived before sunrise, tying her apron with the same gentle hands that cared for her mother at night. Her life wasn't easy, but she never let it show. She greeted every customer with warmth, no matter how tired or worried she felt inside. To her, kindness didn't cost anything. It was something she could always give. That morning, as Emma wiped the counter, the door opened with a soft creak. A cold gust of wind entered, and with it came an old man. His clothes were worn out and wet from the rain. His coat looked too thin for the weather, and his shoes were covered in mud. He carried a small torn bag over his shoulder, and his gray hair was messy under an old cap. Everyone in the diner turned their heads to look at him, then quickly looked away. Some frowned, some whispered. It was clear that no one wanted him there. But Emma noticed something different. The man's eyes weren't angry or lost. They were just tired. The kind of tiredness that came from years of struggle. He hesitated near the door, probably expecting someone to tell him to leave. Instead, Emma smiled and waved him in. "Good morning, sir," she said kindly. "Please come in and take a seat. It's warm inside." The old man blinked in surprise, unsure if she was really talking to him. Slowly, he stepped in, his shoes squeaking against the clean floor. He looked around awkwardly, clutching his small bag. Emma led him to a corner booth near the heater. "You can sit here. It's warmer by the window," she said softly, handing him a menu. He nodded shyly. "Thank you, miss. I don't want to cause trouble," he murmured. "You're not causing any trouble," Emma replied with a gentle smile. "You're welcome here." While the man tried to read the menu, Emma noticed his trembling hands. He looked embarrassed as he counted a few coins on the table. There weren't many, maybe enough for a cup of coffee, but definitely not for a meal. Emma's heart sank a little. She could see he was hungry but too proud to ask for help. After a few minutes, he looked up at her and said softly, "I'll just have some hot water, please." Emma hesitated for a second, realizing he couldn't afford even the cheapest meal. She nodded and went to the kitchen, but instead of just bringing hot water, she quietly filled a bowl with the day's soup, a small piece of bread, and a cup of coffee. She placed it all on a tray and walked back to him with a smile. "Here you go, sir," she said cheerfully. "The soup's on the house today. It'll warm you up." The old man stared at the tray, shocked. "But I didn't order this," he said. "It's okay," Emma replied. "You can have it. We had a little extra this morning." His eyes glistened as he looked up at her. "You're very kind, miss. Not many people treat me this way." Emma simply smiled again. "Everyone deserves a warm meal and a kind word," she said. Then she went back to her work, pretending not to notice the tears forming in his eyes. From behind the counter, her manager, Mr. Collins, was watching the whole thing. He frowned, clearly unhappy. After the man finished eating and left quietly, Emma went to clear the table. The man had left a small note under the empty bowl. It said, "Thank you for your kindness. I will never forget it." There was also a single coin beside the note, probably all he had left. Emma's heart melted. She put the note in her apron pocket, smiling softly. But her moment of warmth didn't last long. Mr. Collins called her over in a sharp tone. "Emma, did you just give that man free food again?" he demanded. She lowered her eyes and nodded. "Yes, sir." He looked hungry. "I thought, that's not your decision to make," Mr. Collins interrupted. "We're running a business, not a shelter." "I understand, sir," she said quietly. "It won't happen again." But deep inside, Emma knew she'd do the same thing again if someone else walked in hungry. She didn't believe kindness was a mistake. Sometimes people just needed one small act of compassion to feel human again. As the rain finally stopped outside, Emma looked through the diner's window and saw the old man walking slowly down the street, his coat flapping in the wind. She didn't know his name, where he came from, or why he looked so broken, but she hoped her small gesture made his day a little brighter. What Emma didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would come back to her in a way she could never imagine. The man she had helped was not who he seemed. Beneath those old clothes and tired eyes was a story that would soon change her life forever. The next morning, the air in Willow Creek was crisp and cold. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, glistening under the weak sunlight. Inside Sunny Bites Cafe, Emma was back at work, wiping tables and humming softly to herself. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the old man she had helped the day before. She wondered where he had gone after leaving the diner, and if he had found a warm place to sleep that night. Emma had served hundreds of customers before, but something about that man stayed in her mind. There had been sadness in his eyes, the kind that comes from years of loneliness, but also a quiet dignity. He hadn't asked for pity or begged for help. He just needed a bit of kindness, and Emma was glad she had given it. As the morning rush began, Emma moved quickly between tables, serving coffee, taking orders, and smiling even when she was exhausted. Around mid-morning, the bell over the door jingled. She turned her head and was surprised. The old man was back. He looked the same, still in the same worn-out clothes, but this time his face was brighter. He smiled shyly as he walked toward the same corner booth. Some of the regular customers whispered to each other again. A few frowned, clearly not happy to see him, but Emma didn't care what others thought. She greeted him with the same warm smile. "Good morning, sir," she said. "You're back. It's good to see you." The old man nodded. "Good morning, miss. I hope I'm not bothering you," he said softly. "Not at all," Emma replied kindly. "You can sit wherever you like." He took the same seat by the heater and placed his little bag beside him. Emma noticed that he still looked tired, but there was something gentler in his eyes today, as if her kindness had given him a bit of hope. She handed him the menu again, but this time he didn't even open it. "I don't have much," he admitted quietly, "but I'd like to buy a small breakfast if that's okay. I don't want to take anything for free today." Emma's heart softened. She could see how proud he was. He didn't want charity. He just wanted to be treated with respect. "Of course," she said. "How about something simple? Toast and eggs?" He nodded and she placed the order. When she brought his plate to the table, the smell of warm toast filled the air. The man smiled with genuine joy. "It's been a while since I had a proper breakfast," he said softly. "Thank you, miss." Emma sat for a moment and asked gently, "If you don't mind me asking, where are you from?" He looked out the window, lost in thought. "I used to live in the city," he said. "Had a business, a house, a family. But life, it changes faster than you think. My wife passed away, my children moved away, and I lost everything. Now I'm just trying to get by." Emma listened quietly. She didn't interrupt, only nodded with understanding. "I'm really sorry," she said. "That must have been hard." The man smiled sadly. "It was. But what hurt most wasn't losing the money. It was how people started treating me differently once I had nothing. Suddenly, I wasn't worth talking to anymore." Emma's eyes softened. "Not everyone is like that," she said. "Some people still care. Sometimes, it just takes one person to remind you that kindness still exists." He looked at her with gratitude. "You remind me of my wife," he said with a chuckle. "She used to say something just like that." Emma blushed slightly and smiled. "She sounds like a wonderful person." "She was," he replied softly. "She believed in helping others, even when we didn't have much ourselves. She used to say, 'The smallest act of kindness can warm the coldest heart.' I didn't understand it back then, but now, I do." For a few moments they sat in silence. The diner buzzed with noise around them, but their conversation felt quiet and meaningful, like two souls finding comfort in an unexpected friendship. As he finished his meal, Emma noticed him searching through his bag again, counting coins carefully. He looked worried, realizing he might not have enough to pay. Before he could speak, Emma gently placed her hand on the bill and said, "Don't worry, it's taken care of." The man looked shocked. "I can't let you do that again," he said quickly. "You already helped me yesterday." Emma shook her head with a warm smile. "It's fine, really. Just think of it as breakfast with a friend." His eyes filled with emotion. He didn't know what to say. People usually ignored him or treated him as invisible. No one ever called him a friend in years. He finally spoke in a trembling voice. "Thank you, miss. I don't think I'll ever forget your kindness. You don't know what this means to me." Emma smiled softly. "Just promise me one thing," she said. "If someday you meet someone who needs help, you'll do the same for them." He nodded firmly. "I will. You have my word." When he left the diner that morning, the sun had broken through the clouds. He walked with his head held a little higher, his steps a little stronger. Something about Emma's kindness had awakened something deep inside him. A reminder of hope, of humanity. As he disappeared down the street, Emma returned to cleaning the tables, unaware that her small act of compassion had touched a heart that held more power than she could imagine. She thought she had helped a poor, lonely man. But in truth, that man was far from ordinary. He was someone whose true identity would one day surprise everyone, including Emma herself. That day, a simple breakfast became the beginning of a life-changing friendship that neither of them could have predicted. The next day at Sunny Bites Cafe started like any other. The morning rush came and went, and the smell of fresh pancakes and brewed coffee filled the air. Emma was wiping down the counter, still smiling to herself as she remembered her conversation with the old man. There had been something comforting about talking to him, something genuine and kind. She didn't know who he really was, but she was happy that he felt welcome enough to return. However, not everyone at the cafe shared her feelings. Her manager, Mr. Collins, was a strict man who cared more about profits than people. He had sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. He liked Emma's work because she was polite and efficient, but he didn't like how soft she was with customers who couldn't pay much. And he especially didn't like that old man she had helped twice already. It was around noon when Mr. Collins called her into his office. Emma hesitated, wiping her hands nervously on her apron before stepping inside. "Sit down, Emma," he said in a serious tone. "We need to talk." She sat quietly, unsure what he was about to say. "I saw what you did yesterday," he continued. "You paid for that old man's meal again, didn't you?" Emma froze. She had hoped he hadn't noticed. "Yes, sir," she said softly. "He didn't have enough money, and—" Mr. Collins raised his hand, cutting her off. "That's not your job, Emma. We're running a business, not a soup kitchen. You can't just give free food to anyone who looks poor." "I know, sir," Emma said quickly, trying to explain. But he was hungry, and it didn't seem right to send him away. It was just one meal. "One meal becomes another," Mr. Collins said sharply. "Next thing you know, every beggar in town will be showing up here expecting free food. We can't afford that." Emma lowered her eyes. "I understand, sir. I didn't mean to break any rules. I couldn't ignore him. He looked like he really needed help." Mr. Collins sighed impatiently. "Good intentions don't pay the bills, Emma. You have a kind heart, but you need to think practically. If you want to keep this job, stop giving food away. Am I clear?" She nodded quietly. "Yes, sir." As she stood to leave, he added coldly, "And one more thing. If that man comes again, you treat him like any other paying customer. No special favors." "Got it." Emma didn't answer. She just nodded again and left the office, her chest tight with emotion. She didn't regret helping the old man, but she hated being scolded for showing kindness. She had grown up poor herself. She knew what hunger felt like, what it meant to have no one care. How could she just turn someone away like that? Back in the dining area, she tried to smile and continue her work as usual, but her heart wasn't in it. The other waitresses whispered to each other, glancing at her. One of them, a young woman named Lily, leaned over and said quietly, "Emma, you shouldn't get in trouble for people like that. It's not worth it." Emma smiled weakly. Maybe not for you, but it is for me. Sometimes a small kindness means everything to someone. Lily shrugged and went back to her customers. Emma sighed and looked toward the window. For a moment, she thought she saw the old man walking across the street, but it was just someone else in a long coat. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Later that afternoon, when the cafe had quieted down, a familiar figure entered. It was him, the same old man, still in his worn coat and cap, though this time he looked more cheerful. He smiled when he saw her and waved gently. Emma smiled back, but her heart sank. Mr. Collins had just warned her not to give him anything for free. She didn't want to disobey again, but she also didn't want to hurt the man's feelings. "Good afternoon, miss," he greeted as he sat at his usual table. "How are you today?" "I'm fine," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "It's good to see you again." He nodded. "I just wanted to say thank you. The meal you gave me yesterday, it meant more than you know." Emma smiled softly. "I'm glad you liked it." He looked around the cafe, then whispered, "I know your boss wasn't happy about it. I saw the way he looked at you. I'm sorry if I caused you trouble." Emma shook her head. "You didn't. It's not your fault. Some people just don't understand that helping others is never a loss." The man smiled kindly. "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who believed the same thing." As he spoke, Mr. Collins walked out from the kitchen. His eyes landed immediately on the old man, and his expression darkened. He walked over quickly. "Sir," he said in a stiff tone, "if you're not here to order something, I'll have to ask you to leave. This isn't a shelter." The old man's smile faded. He stood up slowly, looking embarrassed. "I understand," he said quietly. Emma stepped forward. "Mr. Collins, please, he hasn't done anything wrong." "Emma," Mr. Collins said sharply, "stay out of this." The old man picked up his bag and nodded politely. "It's all right, miss. Thank you for everything. You've already done more than enough." He turned and walked out of the cafe, his steps slow but steady. Emma watched him leave, feeling a deep ache in her chest. She wanted to run after him, but she couldn't risk her job. As the door closed behind him, the cafe suddenly felt colder. Emma sighed and returned to her work, her heart heavy with guilt. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, when she chose kindness over fear, even if she couldn't show it, had left a deep impression on the old man. From the window, he looked back one last time, watching her serve another customer with the same gentle smile. He knew then that she was different. She hadn't helped him for attention or reward. She had done it simply because she cared. And that small act, witnessed and remembered, was about to change her life forever. A few days passed, and Emma had almost stopped expecting to see the old man again. Every time the cafe door opened, she found herself glancing up, half hoping it would be him, but he didn't return. The days rolled by in their usual routine. Customers came and went, coffee cups clinked, and the smell of fresh pies filled the air. Yet something inside her felt empty. She didn't know why, but she missed him. There had been something warm and peaceful about his presence. It was early Friday morning when the rain returned. The sound of it tapping against the cafe windows created a gentle rhythm. Emma was arranging plates behind the counter when she heard the soft chime of the doorbell. She looked up, and there he was. The old man stood at the entrance, holding his small bag and smiling warmly. His clothes were still old but a little cleaner this time, and his eyes looked brighter. Emma's heart lifted. She quickly walked over. "You came back," she said with genuine happiness. He chuckled softly. "I told you I might. Couldn't stay away from your good coffee," he said, his voice light with humor. Emma laughed. "Well, you're always welcome here." He took his usual seat by the heater, and she brought him a menu, though she knew he probably wouldn't order much. This time, however, he didn't seem nervous or shy. Instead, he looked comfortable, like he belonged there. "I'll have the same breakfast as before," he said confidently. "And a cup of coffee, please." Emma nodded, pleasantly surprised. "Coming right up." While she worked, she noticed her manager wasn't around that morning, which gave her a sense of relief. She didn't have to worry about being scolded or watched. She could just treat her customer like anyone else, with kindness. When she brought his food, the old man smiled. "You always remember what I like," he said. Emma smiled back. "That's part of my job. And besides, you're a special customer." He chuckled. "Special? That's a nice way to say old and broke, isn't it?" Emma laughed. "No, I mean special because you appreciate the little things. Most people don't even say thank you anymore." He nodded thoughtfully, stirring his coffee. "That's true. People are too busy chasing what they don't have, instead of being grateful for what they do." Emma leaned slightly on the table and said, "You sound like someone who's lived a lot and learned even more." The old man smiled faintly. "You could say that. I've seen both the best and worst sides of people. But you, Emma, you're different. You treated me kindly when everyone else looked away." "Why?" She thought for a moment before answering. "Because that's what I'd want someone to do for me if I were in your place. I know what it's like to struggle, to feel invisible. And I believe kindness always finds its way back to you." The man looked deeply moved by her words. For a few seconds, he didn't speak. His eyes softened, and he nodded slowly. "You're right," he said finally. "Kindness does come back, sometimes in ways we least expect." They talked for a while about simple things, the weather, their favorite foods, and the town's small joys. Emma learned that he loved to read old books and watch the sunrise. He learned that she was saving money to take care of her mother and one day open a small restaurant of her own. "That's a beautiful dream," he said. "Your mother must be proud." Emma smiled sadly. "She doesn't know much about it anymore. She's been sick for a long time. Some days, she remembers me, and other days, she doesn't." The old man's face softened. "I'm sorry, child," he said quietly. "You must have a heavy heart." "I do," she admitted. "But I've learned that you can't let sadness stop you from being kind. If I can make even one person smile, it makes my day better too." He nodded slowly, clearly touched by her words. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "You have a rare heart, Emma. Don't ever lose it." When he finished his meal, he reached into his pocket and took out a small, folded note. He placed it on the table next to his coffee cup. "I want you to have this," he said. Emma frowned slightly. "What is it?" "Just something that might help you someday," he said with a mysterious smile. "Keep it safe." Before she could open it, he stood up and picked up his bag. "I have to go now, but thank you again for everything." Emma smiled and waved as he left. "Take care of yourself, okay?" He nodded. "And you too, Miss Emma. Don't stop believing in people." When he was gone, Emma unfolded the note. It was simple, just an address written neatly on a small piece of paper and a few words underneath. "If you ever need help, come here." She stared at it, puzzled. The address was somewhere in the city, a few hours away. She didn't recognize it, and there was no name written on it. She wondered if it was his home, or maybe a shelter he stayed in. Whatever it was, she slipped the paper into her apron pocket and decided she'd figure it out another day. That evening, when she returned home to her small apartment, she took the note out again and looked at it under the warm light of her lamp. Something about it felt important, though she couldn't explain why. She smiled faintly, tucked it into her wallet, and whispered to herself, "He's such a kind old man." What Emma didn't know was that the man who sat in her cafe, the one who wore old clothes and carried a torn bag, wasn't just any stranger. His life was far more extraordinary than she could imagine. The address he had given her wasn't random. It was the beginning of a secret that would soon change everything: her job, her dreams, and her future. But for now, Emma slept peacefully, unaware that destiny had already started to move quietly in her favor. All because of one simple act of kindness she had shown to a stranger who wasn't really poor after all. The next morning came with a golden sunrise spilling through the windows of Sunny Bites Cafe. The streets were busy again, and Emma was already on her feet, tying her apron and setting the tables. It had been 2 days since the old man had given her that mysterious note, and though she tried not to think too much about it, the curiosity kept tugging at her mind. Every time she reached into her pocket and felt the folded paper, she wondered who he really was. Why had he given her that address? What kind of help could someone like him possibly offer? He didn't look like a man with much to give, at least not in money. But something about the way he said, "Keep it safe," made her feel that the note carried more weight than it seemed. The day passed like any other. Emma smiled at customers, carried trays, and made small talk with the regulars. Yet, somewhere deep inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was about to happen. Around noon, while she was serving a family their lunch, her manager, Mr. Collins, came rushing out of his office holding a piece of paper. His face was pale with disbelief. "Emma!" he called out loudly. Startled, she put the tray down and hurried over. "Yes, sir. Do you know anything about this?" he asked, holding out a letter. Emma frowned. "What is it?" "It's a catering request," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "A large event in the city. Someone from Hayes Corporation has asked our cafe to serve at their business celebration next week." Emma blinked, confused. "Hayes Corporation? Isn't that one of the biggest companies in the country?" Mr. Collins nodded quickly. "Exactly, and I have no idea how they even heard about us. We're just a small diner in a quiet town." He turned the letter around and showed her. There, at the bottom, was a neat signature, Jonathan Hayes. Emma's heart skipped a beat. That name sounded familiar. She thought for a moment, and then her eyes widened. Jonathan Hayes. That was the name printed on the logo of the business card she'd seen before, the same one she had received from the old man. Could it be the same person? Her mind raced. She remembered his soft smile, the way he had said, "Keep this note safe," and the address he had written, it matched the city address in the letter. Her hands trembled slightly. "Sir," she said quietly, "did the letter say who recommended us?" Mr. Collins looked at the paper again. "It says a Mr. Hayes personally requested that Emma Carter and her team handle the event." He turned to her, eyes wide. "What did you do? Do you know someone from there?" Emma shook her head quickly, her heart pounding. "No, sir. I don't think so." She didn't know how to explain. How could she say that the shabby old man who used to count coins at her table might actually be the billionaire who owned one of the biggest companies in the country? Mr. Collins rubbed his forehead. "Well, whoever this Hayes person is, he must be serious. The payment they're offering is more than this cafe earns in a month. We can't mess this up, Emma. You'll come with us to help serve that day. You're good with customers. Just be professional." Emma nodded, still stunned. "Yes, sir." That night she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the man's words in her head. "If you ever need help, come to this address." Maybe this was his way of helping her. Maybe he really was testing her kindness all along. The next few days went by quickly as the cafe prepared for the big event. Mr. Collins was suddenly in a good mood, barking orders but smiling for once. The entire staff worked hard, polishing plates, testing new dishes, and packing supplies for the trip. When the morning of the event finally arrived, Emma woke up early, nervous but excited. She wore a clean white uniform and tied her hair neatly. As they loaded everything into the van, Mr. Collins kept repeating, "Remember, this is our biggest opportunity. Be on your best behavior." The city looked grand and alive when they arrived. Tall glass buildings reflected the sunlight, and luxury cars lined the streets. Emma had never been to a place like this before. When they reached the address, her heart nearly stopped. It was the same one written on the old man's note. The building stood tall and elegant, with the name Hayes Corporation displayed in silver letters on the glass doors. The staff guided them to the upper floor where the event was being held. Everything looked luxurious. Marble floors, chandeliers, and people dressed in expensive suits. Emma carried a tray of glasses into the hall, her hands trembling slightly. She looked around, and her eyes caught something, or rather, someone. Standing near the stage was the same man she had served at the cafe. But this time he looked completely different. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, shiny shoes, and a confident smile. His hair was neatly combed, and people greeted him with respect. Emma froze in place, unable to move. Her heart raced. "It's him," she thought. "The same man." As if sensing her gaze, the man turned and smiled gently, the same warm smile she remembered. He gave her a small nod, as if to say, "Yes, it's me." Emma stood still, speechless. The poor old man who had once sat shivering in her cafe was now surrounded by executives and reporters. He wasn't a beggar. He wasn't lost or broken. He was Mr. Jonathan Hayes, one of the richest and most respected men in the country. In that moment, everything made sense. The note, the card, his mysterious kindness. He had been testing her character, seeing how she treated someone who looked like they had nothing. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away and smiled softly to herself. She didn't know what was about to happen next, but one thing was certain. Her life was about to change forever because of the kindness she had once shown to a stranger who wasn't poor at all, but a billionaire in disguise. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the grand hall, her tray trembling slightly in her hands. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter filled the air, but she barely heard any of it. All she could see was him, the old man she had served countless times at the diner, now standing tall and confident in a sharp black suit. He wasn't the poor stranger who used to count coins to pay for coffee. He was Jonathan Hayes, the billionaire whose company name shined on every building in the city. Her heart pounded as she tried to make sense of it all. The kind man she had pitied was actually one of the richest men in the country. She remembered his wrinkled coat, his quiet smile, and the way he had thanked her every time she brought him food. He had never acted proud, never looked down on her, and now it was clear why. He had been testing her kindness all along. Emma quickly lowered her gaze and moved toward the buffet table, pretending to stay busy. She didn't want to embarrass herself or interrupt the event. But she couldn't stop sneaking glances at him. He looked completely different. Confident, powerful, and surrounded by people who seemed desperate to talk to him. Yet, every once in a while, his eyes drifted toward her, and a faint smile touched his face, as if he hadn't forgotten the girl who once treated him with respect when everyone else ignored him. As the evening went on, the event became busier. Waiters rushed around with trays of champagne, photographers took pictures, and the sound of music filled the room. Emma did her best to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept spinning. Why did he pretend to be poor? Why didn't he tell me the truth? A few hours later, as the speeches began, Emma was asked to serve water on the main stage. Nervously, she walked to the front, trying not to make eye contact with anyone important. Mr. Hayes, or rather Jonathan, stood at the podium, addressing the crowd. "Tonight," he said in a calm, steady voice, "is not just about celebrating success. It's about remembering where we come from and the people who helped us along the way." Emma paused near the edge of the stage, her heart thumping faster with every word. Jonathan continued, "I've spent years building this company, but along the journey, I've met people who reminded me that kindness still exists in this world. People who help others not for reward, but because it's the right thing to do." There was silence in the hall as he looked across the audience. His eyes met Emma's for a brief moment before he smiled. "Recently, I had the privilege to meet such a person. She didn't know who I was. She saw me as a stranger, maybe even a burden, but she treated me with respect and compassion." A soft murmur spread through the crowd. Emma's hands began to shake. Jonathan's voice grew warmer. "While I sat in a small diner, disguised as a man with nothing, one waitress stood out. She offered kindness when others offered pity. She spoke with patience, smiled without judgment, and never once looked at me as less than human." Now the entire room was listening. People turned their heads, looking around, wondering who he was talking about. Emma felt her throat tighten. Jonathan raised his hand slightly, gesturing toward the back of the hall. "That waitress is here tonight." The spotlight turned and landed directly on Emma. She froze, the tray nearly slipping from her hands. A wave of surprise rushed through the crowd as whispers filled the room. Jonathan smiled gently. "Emma Carter," he said, "please come forward." Her legs felt weak, but somehow, she walked toward the stage. The audience clapped politely, and Mr. Collins stared from the side with his mouth open in disbelief. When Emma reached the podium, Jonathan stepped closer and spoke softly, so only she could hear. "I told you that note would lead to something good," he said with a kind smile. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You were testing me? She whispered. Not testing, he replied. I was looking for someone real. Someone kind without expectation. He turned back to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to someone who reminded me what true humanity looks like. In a world where too many people only show kindness when it benefits them, Emma treated a stranger with dignity and respect. And that is worth more than all the money in the world. The audience erupted into applause. Emma's cheeks burned red as she wiped a tear away. She couldn't believe this was happening. Just days ago, she was struggling to pay rent and serve coffee to strangers. Now, she was standing beside a billionaire who was publicly thanking her in front of hundreds of powerful people. Jonathan turned to her again. I'd like to offer you something, Emma, he said. Not charity, but opportunity. Our company could use someone with your honesty and work ethic. How would you like to manage the new cafe chain we're opening? Emma's mouth fell open in shock. Manage? Me? He nodded. Yes, I've seen how you treat people. That's the kind of heart I want leading my team. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she covered her mouth. I don't know what to say. Just say yes, he said kindly. The entire hall broke into applause again, louder this time. Mr. Collins clapped awkwardly, still in disbelief. Emma could barely breathe. It all felt like a dream, the kind of dream that only happens once in a lifetime. When the event ended, Jonathan walked her to the exit personally. Outside, under the city lights, he said softly, You reminded me that kindness doesn't depend on wealth. It's something people either have or don't. Emma smiled through her tears. And you reminded me that sometimes, helping a stranger can change your whole life. As they shook hands, Emma realized that her act of kindness had come full circle. What she had given freely, compassion and respect, had returned to her in the most unexpected way. That night, as she walked home, the city lights shimmered around her, and her heart was full. She had no idea what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Being kind, even when no one is watching, was the most powerful thing she could ever do. The next morning felt different for Emma. The world around her seemed brighter, even though nothing had changed in the cafe where she worked. Yet deep inside, everything had changed. The applause from the event still echoed in her mind. The crowd's cheers, and Jonathan Hayes's kind words. She had gone to serve food at a billionaire's event, and returned with a job offer that could change her entire life. Still, Emma couldn't believe it was real. She kept wondering if she'd wake up and find out it was all a dream. But when she checked her messages that morning, there it was. An official email from Hayes Corporation, inviting her to their head office to finalize her new position. Her hands trembled as she read it over and over again. She could barely breathe from the mix of excitement and nerves. She arrived early at the shining glass building, the same one she had seen during the event. This time, she wasn't there to serve coffee or carry trays. She was there as a guest and possibly a future manager. When she stepped inside, the receptionist smiled warmly. Miss Emma Carter? The woman asked. Yes, Emma said softly, still a little shy. Mr. Hayes is expecting you, the receptionist said and guided her to the elevator. The elevator ride felt endless. The walls were made of glass, showing the breathtaking view of the city below. Emma's heart thumped with every passing floor. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. After all, she had faced tougher days. Double shifts, rude customers, and bills she couldn't pay. She could handle this. When the doors opened, she saw Jonathan Hayes waiting for her in a spacious office that overlooked the entire skyline. He wasn't wearing the intimidating aura of a billionaire anymore. Instead, his smile was warm and genuine, just like the man she remembered from the diner. Emma, he said cheerfully, I'm glad you came. Of course, she said nervously. I still can't believe any of this is happening. He chuckled softly. You'd be surprised how rare genuine people are in this world. You stood out, and I don't ignore people who make an impact. He walked her through the office, showing her the new project he had mentioned, a cafe chain focused on kindness and community service. I want to open cafes that don't just sell food, he explained. I want places where people feel seen, heard, and respected. The way you made me feel at your diner. Emma's eyes lit up as he spoke. That's beautiful, she said sincerely. I was hoping you'd think so, he said with a smile. I want you to manage our first branch. You'll help train the staff, set the tone, and make sure customers always feel welcome. Emma was speechless. Mr. Hayes, I don't have experience running a business. I'm just a waitress. He shook his head. No, Emma, you're not just a waitress. You're someone who sees people as equals, and that's something money can't buy. Skills can be taught, but heart, that's rare. For a moment, her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She'd spent years working in the background, unnoticed, struggling to get by. And now someone was trusting her with something so big. Jonathan handed her a folder. This is your contract. Take your time to read it. We'll support your training, provide housing near the cafe, and of course, your salary will be more than fair. Emma opened the folder slowly and gasped. The amount written there was more money than she had ever imagined earning in her life. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice trembling. He smiled kindly. You already did, Emma, the day you handed a stranger a cup of coffee without judgment. Emma laughed softly, remembering that day. I just did what anyone should do. Maybe, Jonathan said thoughtfully, but not everyone does it. Over the next few weeks, Emma began her training. She learned about management, customer service, and the vision behind Hayes Community Cafes. Jonathan visited often, offering advice and encouragement. Despite his wealth and status, he never treated her like an employee. He treated her like an equal, someone who had earned her place. The first cafe opened in a quiet corner of the city. Emma made sure the walls were painted in warm colors, the chairs were cozy, and the staff greeted everyone with a genuine smile. She trained her team to treat every customer kindly, whether they were rich or poor, polite or grumpy. You never know who someone really is or what they're going through, she would tell them. A smile can change someone's whole day. The cafe quickly became popular. People loved the atmosphere, the warmth, and the way the staff made them feel special. Jonathan occasionally dropped by, always disguised in simple clothes, just to watch how the place ran. Sometimes, he would sit quietly in the corner, observing, and each time he left, he would give Emma a proud nod. One evening, after closing time, Jonathan came in just as Emma was wiping down the counter. She smiled when she saw him. You're checking on me again, aren't you? He chuckled. Old habits die hard, he said. But really, I just wanted to say thank you. She blinked in surprise. You're thanking me? Yes, he said sincerely. You reminded me what truly matters. When I started pretending to be poor, I wanted to see if people only respected my money. Most did. But you showed me something better. That kindness still exists without conditions. Emma smiled softly. And you showed me that kindness doesn't go unnoticed. For a moment, there was silence between them, the kind of silence that feels peaceful, full of understanding. Jonathan smiled warmly. You've done well, Emma. The cafe is thriving because of you. But I think this is just the beginning. She tilted her head. The beginning? He nodded. I'm planning to open more cafes in other towns, maybe even other countries. And I want you to lead the entire project. Emma's eyes widened. You mean me? In charge of all of them? He grinned. Who else would I trust? Her heart swelled with joy. The girl who once served tables in a small diner was now about to lead an international project. All because she showed kindness to a stranger who turned out to be a billionaire in disguise. As they stood in the soft glow of the cafe lights, Emma realized something profound. You never know where an act of kindness might lead. Sometimes, one simple gesture can open doors to a future brighter than you ever imagined. Months passed, and Emma's life had completely transformed. The girl who once worked long hours in a small-town diner was now the manager of several cafes across the city. Her days were busy, but in the best way possible. She loved her work, not because of the salary or the title, but because she was doing something meaningful. Every cafe she opened followed one golden rule: serve with kindness, no matter who the person is. Under her guidance, the Hayes Community Cafe chain became a symbol of warmth and compassion. People from all walks of life came to her cafes. Rich businessmen, taxi drivers, college students, and even the homeless. Everyone was treated the same. Emma made sure of that. One rainy afternoon, Emma was sitting in her office reviewing the monthly reports when her assistant rushed in. "Emma, there's someone asking for you," she said. "Who is it?" Emma asked, glancing up. The assistant smiled. "He says his name is Mr. Hayes." Emma laughed softly. "Of course it is," she said and stood up. Jonathan Hayes rarely announced his visits beforehand. He liked showing up quietly, like an old friend dropping by. When she stepped into the cafe, she saw him sitting at his favorite corner table, the same way he used to sit at her diner months ago. But this time he wasn't pretending to be poor. He wore a simple gray suit, yet he still carried that same humble smile. "Mr. Hayes," she greeted warmly. He smiled. "Emma, how many times do I have to tell you? Just call me Jonathan." "Old habits," she said with a grin. "You taught me to respect my customers." "And you learned too well," he replied with a chuckle. "Sit with me for a minute." She sat across from him, and for a few moments they simply watched the customers around them. A young man held the door open for an elderly lady, a mother helped her child choose a pastry, and two college students laughed over coffee. The atmosphere was peaceful, exactly as Emma had always dreamed. Jonathan finally spoke. "You've done something incredible here, Emma. These cafes have changed how people treat each other. You've built something that money alone could never create." Emma smiled shyly. "I just tried to follow what you taught me. That kindness matters." He nodded slowly. "Yes, but you didn't just follow it, you lived it. You turned an act of kindness into a movement." Emma blushed. "You're exaggerating." "Not at all," he said. "You see, years ago, when I first decided to test people by pretending to be poor, I had almost lost faith in humanity. Too many people saw me as worthless when I wore old clothes. They ignored me, mocked me, or refused to help. But then, I met you." Emma's heart softened as she remembered those days. How he would come in every morning with his worn-out jacket, sitting in the corner while everyone else avoided him. "You reminded me," he continued, "that good people still exist. You didn't see what I wore. You saw who I was. And that simple act gave me hope again." She smiled warmly. "I just did what felt right. And that's exactly why it mattered," he said, smiling. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the gentle rain tapping on the windows. Then Jonathan pulled out an envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I've been meaning to give you," he said. "Consider it a token of appreciation." Curious, Emma opened it. Inside were several documents, and when she read them, her eyes widened. They were ownership papers. "Jonathan," she gasped, looking up, "this says I own half of the Hayes Community Cafe chain." He smiled softly. "That's right. You earned it. You're the heart of this business, Emma. Without you, these cafes wouldn't exist." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not," he said firmly. "You gave me something priceless when I had nothing, kindness. And now, I'm just returning a small part of that kindness to you." Emma wiped a tear and laughed softly. "You really never stop surprising me, do you?" Jonathan chuckled. "Well, I do try." As the day went on, they talked about new ideas, expanding to smaller towns, hiring more people who needed second chances, and setting up free coffee programs for the homeless. Jonathan believed in Emma's heart, and Emma believed in his vision. Together, they wanted to make the world a little kinder, one cup of coffee at a time. When evening came, the cafe started to empty. The lights grew softer, and the rain had finally stopped. Jonathan stood to leave, adjusting his coat. "I should go. I've taken enough of your time." Emma stood too. "Jonathan," she said quietly, "before you go, thank you." He looked at her curiously. "For what?" "For everything," she said with a sincere smile. "You changed my life. But more than that, you reminded me that being kind is never wasted." Jonathan smiled, his eyes warm. And you reminded me that wealth means nothing without compassion. They shared a quiet moment before he finally turned to leave. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back at her. "Never stop being you, Emma," he said. "The world needs more people like you." She smiled, her heart full. "And the world needs more people like you too." After he left, Emma stood by the window, watching him disappear into the busy street. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and she thought about how far she had come, from serving a poor stranger to running a company that inspired thousands. She knew that life wasn't just about success or wealth. It was about how you treat people when no one's watching, how you offer kindness even when you don't expect anything back. That night, as she closed the cafe, she looked at the glowing sign outside, Hayes Community Cafe, and smiled. Under it, in smaller letters, was the motto she had written herself: "Kindness is the richest gift we can give." And in her heart, she knew that one simple act of compassion had changed not just her life, but countless others too.